Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Wednesday of Spec Talk. I don't know if you can hear the church bells in the distance ringing. I have my office window open, and the bells are ringing because it's noon. So if that's coming through, bear with me for a second. But welcome back, everybody. Today is, I've been waiting for this one for a long time. I think today's episode is going to be really amazing. Alex, let's jump to the next slide and introduce our friends that are on with us today. So with you, as always, is Alex Barrow, who is one of our strategic account executives. Then there's me, of course, Dory Azar. I'm an architect up here in Canada. Well, you can't see it on the green screen, but I got my little flag with me today, an account executive also at RIB. And then with us, we have sustainability expert Garrett Ferguson, who is going to be here to really bring us up to speed on the state of sustainability. And he'll be here to answer any sustainability related questions that you've got. And our familiar face around town, Holly Jordan, our specification expert, is here to answer any of your sustainable spec questions as well. So it's really going to be a well-rounded episode today where I'm hoping we're going to have a lot of questions and a lot of really, really good conversation to boot. Alex, we do want to remind everybody that for each webinar we are doing a contest. So if you have a project that you've specified in SpecLink and want to submit it for your chance to win one of these waterproof speakers you see, as well as some other SpecLink swag, you can send that information to the email address you see on screen here. So what the information that we need is the project name, the firm name, the owner, and the location of the project in an email to kristen.tiliakos@rib-software.com. And if somebody could plug that into the chat so that we can have that information handy for anybody that wants to access it, that would be fantastic as well. So consider your projects and all the good stuff you've been doing in SpecLink. Next slide, please.
Oh, we don't want to go there yet, or do we?
Oh, no. All right. Yeah, we do. Let's announce last week's winner.
Okay.
All right. Fantastic. And it's a good looking project. Last week's winner was Timothy Blattner from Fitzgerald Associates Architects in Chicago, and the project was Foundry. And it's this beautiful project you see on screen here. I love that glass. I love the elevations of this building. And I'm seeing the rooftop pool, and I'm thinking from a specification perspective, we could probably do a whole webinar just on specifying rooftop pools. Holly, what do you think? Is that a tricky thing to spec, or is rooftop pools, where do they fall on the complexity scale?
Well, we just want to make sure that we got our waterproofing, correct, so it doesn't, leak down into the building. That's what makes it complex. It's not the pool that's complex. It's the waterproofing.
All right. I imagine a rooftop pool leaking could lead to one or two or three problems. Good point.
Oh, yeah.
Good point. I also want to point out 4 or 5, yeah, or 6, we could just keep going. The other thing that I want to point out too, in the materials tab of today's webinar, you will find a handout that's going to give you access to a link to either do a SpecLink trial. There's going to be a link to access the previous recordings of our Spec Talk episodes. And if you're new, you definitely want to go back and check some of them out. There's some really great topics and great conversations that were had. And then the third link that's on there is slipping my mind at the moment. Alex, you remember what that third link was?
Yeah, so it's the ability to sign up for our next Spec Talk.
Yes, that's it. See, Alex,
yes.
So good to work with you, my friend. So now that we've got the housekeeping done, why don't we dive in? Why don't we get SpecLink open here, and then I'm going to start with a question for Garrett. And at this point now, guys, the comment section and the questions are going to be open. So if anybody's got any questions, or if you just want to kick back and listen today, we've got a lot to talk about. Garrett, I'd love to start today by just picking your brain on how would you summarize the state of sustainability in the built environment right now? I can't, I got to imagine, and I know there's so much noise in that world, right? There's some great information, there's some terrible information. But as a professional in that realm, in that arena, how would you describe for the listeners today the state of sustainability in the built environment?
Yeah, I would say that it is growing rapidly. I have only seen it expand to more specializations with various areas of focus within that, right? taking deeper dives into each conversation, right? So taking one into carbon, taking a deeper conversation into water, and how we're doing each different topic in its own way. It's also becoming far more common, I think. I mean, I'm working on really common projects that you see all over the place, in every city in America, and all of them have sustainability programs. In some place more and more that just becomes that's the number one thing I would say. It's far more common and requested specifically, right? Younger generations are asking that question. It was like I just saw something last week, I think, that said 90% of them say that's like the climate is one of their top priorities, and they're asking about that and wanting that. And so companies are seeing that and responding to that by beginning to implement these more and more as they're trying to attract customers and different things.
Okay. And on that note, like, what's the when you say people are asking for it, are they asking for lead? Are they asking for well? Are they asking for green glow? Like, what is the ask from people? You get the phone call and they're saying, like, what's the general question that the general service they want from you?
That kind of depends. Lead is by far the most common conversation, right? Since it's a third party review. And it's way more common than any of the other rating systems. But it's not always just lead. Sometimes it's how can we do sustainability and get that integrated into what we do without necessarily going for a rating system, which has its benefits, right? And is still definitely a good effort and approach and makes difference. Anything that can make a positive impact has the ability to make that positive change, right? So little things like that make a big difference. But I would say by far lead is the most common.
Okay.
But those conversations are quickly and rapidly changing as well to decarbonization and focusing on that, which lead V5 is going to have a much stronger emphasis on carbon.
Okay. On that, while we're talking about lead, and I know lead is kind of the acronym that represents them all. If anybody knows anything about sustainability, they've heard of lead. But with regards
Right.
to rating systems, what are the benefits to them? Like, why would somebody want that extra? Because I imagine there is an extra investment in going for these certifications. So
Yeah, there
what
can
are
be.
the
Right.
benefits? Yeah, what are the benefits to following those checklists and going through those processes?
Yeah, so the rating systems tend to get a lot of criticism, right? The people say things
Mhm.
like, well, I don't want to just follow a checklist. I don't want to put, what's the most common one I've always heard? It's I don't want to put bike racks on a building in Alaska somewhere where they're covered in snow 9 months of the year and nobody can get to them, right? And that's a pretty reasonable criticism.
Mhm.
But rating systems really have a lot of benefits, specifically when you actually go through the third party review. In my experience, projects that design to rating systems and don't go through the third party review, don't actually go for certification, about half of the strategies, which is significant. Half of the strategies fall off before the project is over because there's not enough budget. Suddenly, it's not as important. Um, you know, we all went through the VE process, right? Those things are all determined there. And when an owner steps up and actually says, I want to certify this and send it in for review, it keeps those strategies in place all the way through. It also, as you get close to the higher tiers and to the next bump, right? People get excited about that, especially owners. They're like, well, if we're certified and we're, just a few points away from silver, can we make it to silver? Right. And so
Right.
it actually helps stretch instead of just saying, well, we're just going to remove all of this because we don't want to pay for it.
So
That's
it's a kind of elastic. Like they sometimes go in both directions where if they're in the middle, they could either fall off or ramp up. Okay.
right. No owner ever wants to hear the story of we're shooting for silver and we're not going to make it. We're only going to get certified, right? There's
Mhm.
always got to be a plan in place, which is one of our responsibilities to help us figure out how we can do that and do that affordably without breaking anybody's bank and figure out what strategies are easiest for them to implement and achieve.
And so I'm guessing any of our other consultants that we would work with on a project, whether it's a structural engineer or a landscape architect, as a sustainability consultant, you want to be involved in that project from day one,
The
first
beginning,
meeting.
right?
You
Even
from the
before,
very
yeah, if we really
okay.
can be. Yeah,
So
which
what
never
what are
happens.
what? What are you talking? Consultants are always on board at day one, aren't they?
Yeah.
No, I just lied. No, that's not true.
No,
But
no. If we can be on board as soon as possible, we have the best ability to make a positive impact, right? As you as you get further along in the project, it becomes just more difficult to go in and make those changes and say, well, actually, the materials you've chosen are have some health concerns around them, and then they're like, well, we've already shown the client these, and the clients already like them, right? I'm like, well, that's
Yeah.
great. Can you, and so the architect doesn't want to look bad, or the interior designer doesn't want to say, I chose a material that I didn't know had some health concerns,
Mhm.
um, if they've already purchased it, right, there's not much we can do with conversations like that. So when we have the ability to be involved as soon as possible, we have the ability to make those changes far easier than ever before, um, because the decisions haven't been made yet. And then at that point, we can inform those decisions, which is one of the things that I really believe is our primary responsibility.
Yeah, you're just keeping it on the rails, right? Before anybody makes too many decisions that are gonna, cause it to just lose its footing, right? You want to
Right.
be there to make sure that the targets are hit. Holly, I want to pick your brain a little bit too on Garrett had mentioned, selecting materials possibly incorrectly or that are counter to the goals of the project. What are you looking for early on? Because you're a consultant as well, and I imagine you want to be involved in the project as early as
Right.
possible. What are some of those things that you're looking to contribute at the onset of those projects? Like the way day one, what contribution are you suggesting towards the project?
So the first thing I do, I'm going to back up a little bit. I'll roundaboutly answering your question. So the first thing we always ask, one of the first questions we ask, are what are your sustainability goals? That's really important. Not everyone wants to um, do a lead or well, or so we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, and we have certain things just as basic good standard practice in our specifications that are sustainable. So when I was learning or working on sustainability items, the thing that I did was I went to Garrett and I said, what is a list of good basic standard practices that if you have a client that says we don't want to do the whole accreditation, we don't want to pay for it, what are some good standard practices? So we always look for low VOCs in our product. So when someone suggests a product, I always look at it, environmentally to see if it just meets those minimum criteria. And if it doesn't, I'm going to call it to their attention. I give people an example of I I used to, get in the car dealership and like breathe in nicely and like, oh, that new car smell. Well, that's you don't hear about that anymore, do you? That's off gassing. That's VOCs. So I always use that as an example to our clients and say, have you thought about this product? So we vet the products, and one of the things is we get the materials and we get the selections from our architectural teams, but we also have to, a lot of projects you have to use more than one. You have to use at least three manufacturers or at least three products. So the products that I'm always going to suggest are the ones that are more sustainable and meet the basic criteria, what we call kind of like light green, right? We want to make sure that we're moving forward even if the client doesn't want to get the lead or get the third party review. So I
So
always
this is just for any project that you're bringing these
any
principles to any project
any
that you're working on.
any project.
Okay.
I learned this from Garrett. You can do this. Or what about, we have a list, and one of the things that we had talked about previously was shortly in the future, how is the code going to change to incorporate these things? Do you remember that, Garrett? You gave me a list of things that were going to be, in the next year or so, going to be required. So these are some of the things that we call our clients' attention to when we're specifying. Does that answer your question?
Right. Which
That
seems funny
answered.
too, because that's a common conversation, I
Hmm.
think, that I have on every project is I'll be on it
Yep.
and I'll say, well, what's the energy code? And people like uncomfortably look around the room and say, we haven't checked yet. And I'm like, that's something you need to check because every city has adopted this differently. Some states have adopted
Hmm.
it, but cities adopt their own, and it really can alter how the project performs
Right.
significantly, which affects cost,
Yep.
Excellent.
especially
So
as energy codes become more stringent and will continue to become more stringent.
Right.
yeah, how often are you finding our energy codes being updated, Garrett?
It depends on the city. You mean how often does a city adopt it?
Yeah, yeah. Like if because I mean I've worked on projects as most of us have that take years and years and years, right? So it's
Right.
interesting how you know mid-project things can change. So the set of criteria you're
Yes.
working on for this project, now you're halfway through this project and you're starting your next project, but they might be two different sets of criteria. Like even you were saying
Yeah.
the lead, there's a new lead version coming out soon, right?
Right. Yeah. That's supposed to
Yeah.
launch the pilot version, or I think that's supposed to officially launch in Q1 2025, and it's going to be very
Okay.
different, yeah, than V4 is. Um, Energy codes, it really depends on the city. Some cities are more aggressive with it, and they'll adopt it every 3 years as the new code comes out, which is on a 3-year cycle. Um, some states will adopt it. I think COVID kind of threw that into but threw a wrench into that mix and slowed things down a little bit from what I'm seeing. But it just kind of depends. And the easiest answer is just call the code officials and ask them. I was just working on a project in Washington, and they were submitting the core and shell drawings, but then we were submitting separate TI drawings. And the easiest, like, we had a whole meeting about, well, what are we going to do? How is this going to be approached? And I just said the best answer here is just to call the code official on the phone
Mhm.
and say, what do we need to do and how do we need to work with this? And that was the clearest answer I had. And for some reason, a lot of people were hesitant to do that. So
Hmm.
Which is interesting, right? Because it's that would be your definitive answer is to make that phone call and just or send that
right,
email and just get that truth of how they interpret it in
right,
that moment.
right,
Um,
100%. And it took me less than 5 minutes.
but we'd rather spin our wheels for some reason and just kind of guess and sort of maneuver
Right.
around that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. Holly, why don't you let's talk SpecLink for a moment then too, and
Hmm.
where where we can find some of the sustainability content within SpecLink and how that can support some of the early decisions that you guys have been talking about here.
I really love the standard content that SpecLink has with regard to sustainability. There's a section for overall section for VOC content restrictions. There are checklists that you can use. I like that prohibited content installer um, document there. It was on my screen. Yeah,
There it is, the top
prohibited
check mark there.
content in installer certification. How interesting is that? Project sustainability goal. I think the installation. See, if you look at 2.01, there it says, I certify that the installation work of my firm on this project has or has not required the use of adhesives. And I just think it's like there are some like what I feel like some really interesting sections, and I encourage everybody to kind of take a look at these. So it says VOC content restrictions are specified in section 016116. I think that's a great section. Even if you're not going to put that section in your spec, I think it's very helpful for when you're writing all of the other sections to think about what are some good basic, VOC, restrictions. So I really like to use these sections because they're very, in my opinion, very helpful. There's a wonderful checklist in here that Alex is going to pull up for us. There we go. So
Ready to go.
Yeah. So I like that project sustainability goal credit summary. That's really
Hmm.
cool. Uh, you know,
Yeah, let's take a look
accessory
at that.
material VOC content. That's like there are just some really interesting um, Division 1 sections here that I really recommend everybody at minimum taking a look at.
Holly, are there any sneaky VOC material, high VOC or low VOC materials out there that people might not have on their radar? Like, is there, um, I know paints have come a long way, but is there
Oh yeah.
something out there that people need to pay a little more attention to because it might have a higher VOC than we expect?
I think that's a question for you, Garrett.
Um, let's see,
Volley.
paints have come a long way. Like
Oh yeah.
people don't even realize that when they go to a hardware store, most of the paints, not all of them, but a lot of them, just off the shelf paints have green guard gold labels and things like that, right? That have gone through
Mhm.
that testing.
Mhm.
It's some of like those dealers sometimes can. Intimescent paints is a one that we frequently run into is a bit of a
Okay.
challenge in trying to find one. But wood is a pretty common one as well. It's not, a wet applied material, but making sure that you have low formaldehyde or no added uroformaldehyde wood is
Cabinets
important,
cabinets are a problem. So
right?
so
Which is
uh,
specifically particle board.
right. So for example, if you're doing maybe like an apartment or something and you're not using a commercial type woodwork, you're using prefab cabinetries. They may have the
Mhm.
KCMA um certificates on them, but I found that it was like really hard to find some cabinets a while back. It may have changed, but it was really hard to find um you know, uh, that type of residential casework um, material that was no VOC or low VOC because they are all particle board, which I think of particle board as like cringe. No,
But so
it has its
Marjorie,
place, I suppose.
we just got an interesting comment from Marjorie. Saying that fluid applied flooring is an example. It dries
Yeah,
to practically non-emitting, but a lot of types won't meet LEED's IEQ requirements because of the VOCs emitted during
yeah,
application.
that's true. But if you
Excellent
Right.
have
point.
And that
have it, it's like sometimes people want something that has like no VOCs, or you have to also take into account, yes, we want 100%, sustainable product, but sustainability is not just the VOCs, it's also longevity. We want something that's going to perform and something that's going to last. So there can be a trade-off, right, Garrett? Is that what you
there
think?
can be, there can be. And obviously best case scenario is to find one product that meets all of the criteria, right?
Right.
Which is definitely possible. Um, so fluid applied flooring, I'm trying to think of specifically what Marjorie would be referencing there. Like what kind of that. Um, but there, I would say
Like an epoxy type
most,
form?
They're
right,
very
that's what I'm
smelly.
that's what I'm thinking. They are very
Yeah,
smelly, right? And they're
they are very
smelly
smelly.
specifically probably because of like the petroleum products that are in them,
Right.
right? Which is known to be have significant health concerns around it, right? So the few questions would be, can we find a low emitting option? And that would be reaching out to a manufacturer or finding other ones, right? That's one of the best sources to do. Um, or how can we find an alternative product, maybe if that's possible, right? If this really is going to do that. I mean, she has a good point that like maybe they're smelly during the construction process, but they're not emitting later, and that's great. But not
Unless
the
you're the
manufacturers, the
contractor.
installers, right? The
Yeah.
installers do have to experience all of that, right?
Mhm.
And that's something that is becoming a more common conversation, specifically around like silica and other things like that. That the manufacturing of some of these products has direct health impacts on the people making it or installing it, right? So how can we make sure that we're not then putting these people in harm's way so that the rest of us have a safe space?
Yeah, it's an interesting that the VOCs change from install to use, right? So it's not an exposure thing to the end user, it's an exposure thing to the installer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Hmm. Holly, what are some other areas within SpecLink that you like when it comes to sustainability?
Well, I mean, mainly all these Division Ones, they've been specifically. I don't have those sections anywhere else, and so in any, so these, I love these, and also I can click in this section, and it's going to turn on, information in the other sections, in the technical sections. So I think that's really. I like this one has like social equity in it. So I feel like this is like really, uh, really coming along now. I mean, 10 years ago we weren't even thinking about that, and now we have that. I like the way this is divided out, and you can click on something in here, and it's gonna kind of notify you in the way that it's linked. It's going to notify you in the specific section. So I really feel like this works well when you use it the way it's supposed to be used. It works really well. I was kind of
So,
rambling, wasn't I?
No, that's
Holly,
good. And yeah, you're
we
right. And it's
we
got,
we invite you here for the rambling, Holly. That's
Oh, okay, thanks.
if we didn't
Yeah.
want the rambling, we would just shut the cameras off and everybody would just sit in silence.
Yeah.
So please ramble on.
Yeah. So the
yeah, so you're
individual
right.
sections have the information in them, and if you use the checklist, it's going to activate that information. And I have people who are using total user sections, and so you can do that as well. You can create this document and link your documents to make a checklist and activate all of the sustainability. I mean, all of the sections have information about low VOCs now. That's pretty standard. I mean, can you think back when we
Yeah.
didn't have that in our specs, like VOC content requirements? I can't now anymore. So all of the specs have that. They have the sustainably harvested wood. So Alex clicked that in his Division One section, and now you can see that it's green. It's activated in his rough carpentry section.
And this is all within the lead category, lead designation, correct?
I mean, you can use it. It doesn't say lead here. It says sustainability certification. So it's kind of made it I like that it's a little more broad, that you may not necessarily be going for lead, but you can
Mhm.
still use this section to activate, use this section or this checklist to activate what you want content wise in your regular, technical sections.
So this is still going to help us build out our lead or our rating systems, I should say,
Yep.
right? So
hmm
if can we get an idea of our point totals while we're in here also?
I think you can. I think
Yes.
you can because there's checklists. The thing I like is, like you saw on his list there, it had lead, it had green globes, it had
Mhm.
well. It's really
Yeah,
expanded
that's right.
for more than just lead. I like that there are other rating systems that are in Division One that you can use.
Right.
And that would
Yeah. So
probably not include like some of the other things that are outside of that, right? So I bet you could like get everything because there's location credits, there's other
right.
credits that aren't necessarily building
Material
driven.
Yeah,
based.
they're
Right,
so
Right.
site specific, right?
Right.
right.
Um,
Right.
So like those you would rely on your sustainability consultant for.
from day
Always.
one, the sustainability consultant that was there from the very beginning,
Right.
and that
Right, from day
we don't have to go
right,
back from day one.
right. Not
We've got to. Yeah, we're gonna keep reinforcing that theme here. Just get your consultants
yeah.
in early.
Yep.
Um,
Earlier the better. Yep. For
yeah,
everybody.
absolutely. We've got a question here from Paul, which is a good question. It's a little longer, so I'll read it, and hopefully we can help out here. It says our firm is used to standard verbiage that was provided within individual sections in master spec content. When we transition to SpecLink content, we aren't seeing the same verbiage within individual sections that would help the contractor know which lead credits we're going after. How do you recommend we integrate the requirements for products that would get us those lead points within a SpecLink project manual?
mean, there's no reason why you can't develop that verbiage and put it in your sections. I mean, you nothing is perfect out of the box, right? So, I mean, you're not going to like, you know, go to the car dealership and get in the car and like not turn your lights and set your wipers to automatic and move your seat back. It's the same kind of concept with regard to your specifications. If there was some verbiage that you really liked in another, another platform, or that you typically use in your masters, add it in. It takes a little bit of effort, but once it's in there, even if you don't want to use it for every project, the way you can set it up as a checklist, or in your document, it's always there. You just click it off. So, I mean, I would recommend that you, if it doesn't have the verbiage that you want, take the time to add it in. It will be time well spent.
All right. Melody is asking a question too about to show how the checklist links to other divisions and sections. Alex, this might be the way I'm reading that question is to show exactly the links on the left-hand side there,
Yeah,
and
there they are.
well, yeah,
Sure. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. So again, there's really two primary checklists. I mean, we have them sort of categorized by different, rating systems like LEED, well, Green Globes, but let's just, focus on LEED here. So again, we've got the credit summary checklist, which is going to help you sort of tally out the particular credits that you're looking to achieve. So it kind of gives a bit of a roadmap. It tells you, the points. It tells you if it's required or maybe you can kind of prioritize things. And then we have this certification procedures checklist. So what this does, as you start to build out that credit summary, it links to this section right here that we're looking at, and it will go through and it starts to bring in. It'll start to, based on those types of credits. It'll turn on in this checklist the specific sections where they apply. And then we've mapped out here the particular sort of branches that link to those technical sections. So like here for heavy timber framing, for instance, if I go ahead and open that one up. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and what it's going to do, since I turned this on here, is it should link to, like, for instance, down here below 67. So we're talking about, okay, sorry, bear with me for just a second. We're talking about the sourcing of the wood. So it's, we have I think something in here that talks about source wood within a 500-mile radius. Okay, so it's lowering the the cost and the sourcing of the wood to make it closer to the construction site. So different examples like that. Certain materials and things, but it can be kind of like in this case a logistics based example.
So what happened was when he clicked on it in that other document, it put a suggested on line 52. It turned line 52 on. It turned it yellow, so it's notifying you, hey, somewhere somebody's talking about me. Okay, it's linked. They're linked that way. Is that correct, Alex?
That's right.
Yep.
Ollie, I think I got a question here for you, or more of a comment. I'd love to hear your response to this. It reads, it would be great to add a Division 1 section to list criteria and categories for guiding principles for sustainable federal buildings.
Ooh, that would be
Wouldn't
awesome. I mean, you could do it like one of two ways. So you could create a standalone section for that, right? Or you could take one of the current sections and add to the checklist up top and say, for federal buildings, okay, and you could link that to the items that are required. I mean, there's always more than one way to do things, and no way is wrong. So think about okay, do you use it so much that you really want to have a standalone section, or do you want to just create a checklist for when you want to use it? So the first thing is think about okay, how are you going to use it? And then think outside the box. No way is wrong. I mean I don't necessarily do things maybe the correct way, or how the guys who work for SpecLink do it. You know so think about how you're going to use it, and what would make it easiest for you. Okay? Does that answer, Dory?
I think so, yeah. And I'm going to piggyback off that statement here with the specifics of federal buildings there. Garrett, is there a building type or a sector in your observation, in your experience, that's leading the way with their commitment to sustainable design, sustainable buildings? Are there you see a lot of apartments? Are you seeing a lot of schools? Are you seeing, um, are you seeing it coming from more from one direction?
Yeah, it kind of depends. Like the GSA has they put out some low carbon concrete requirements well before anybody else did, and really like made it an official standard. And that was definitely far more innovative than anybody else. But if that means that the GSA can do it, anybody can do it, right? If they're saying it's available all over the country, then it is, and it is available all over. Higher ed tend to be a little more focused on that, right? And I think part of that is they're a little more research focused, a little bit more, the living laboratories trying new things. That's a pretty common conversation for higher ed to have some interest in that. And I feel like they generally push that conversation a little further than other places. Uh,
Maybe it's the users too. I mean, if you think about
mhm.
higher ed being more proactive, that is where our students are, and that
Right.
is
Who
where
care
our
about it?
our,
They
our
really
young
do.
people who care about. Yeah, I think that was good. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, what did you say, Garrett, about trees and family trees? I think that's
Oh, this is so good. Say it. Hold on. Say it slow. Everybody's got to
Yeah,
listen to
say it
this.
again,
Great.
Garrett. I love that.
So a lot of people, it's funny because I grew up in Texas where oil is king, right? It is here. And so every lot, I've been called tree hugger and I'm just like, that's fine. I'm going to be a tree hugger. I really like trees. But sustainability isn't just about trees, right? It's not just about trying to save the environment. It's about the family tree, right? It's really about providing a space for my children and my grandchildren and their children to provide the same quality of environment that I have, right? So to have enough water, to have the same kind of clean air, to be able to have the same resources, right? Sustainability really boils down to needs. And me living my life in a way that lets future generations also meet their own needs, right? And it really is like, the airplane analogy, right? If I don't put that mask on myself, I can't put it on for my child next to me, right? In an emergency situation, right? I have to be able to do what I need to do so that I can then help them. But it's not about I'm going to put it on and then you're not going to get a mask because I'm going to take all the oxygen, right? It's that I've got to do it so I can help you, right? It's really about helping future generations have the same quality of life that we have now: clean air, clean water, free of PFAs and toxins and things like that, so that they can live a happy life, right? It's really looking to the future.
That was my favorite quote of yours, Garrett.
I
I
could
love
listen to that
that.
answer. I might go back to the replay and just listen to that over again a couple of times.
Yeah.
That's so well said.
Just write
So
that
well
write that
said.
on your mirror and just say it every day,
We're
right? This
we're
is
gonna
this is
need
why
Yeah.
I
mugs
want
and
to do
t-shirts
very
SpecTalk.
like
presidential.
Yeah.
Garrettisms or something like that.
Dory's all about the t-shirts.
Oh, just
Yeah,
moving
all
on,
about all
Holly.
about the
Moving
sayings.
on.
Sorry.
Awesome. It just uh, oh, Melody said, "Thank you, Garrett. All generations are concerned about sustainability, not just young people." So, um, and that was in all caps. So
And
Melody means business. And
right,
what do we consider young anymore? What's the threshold anymore? Because in my head, I'm still 19, but my passport begs to
right.
differ. But
I
it's
wasn't
the
saying that, like all generations aren't, that there aren't people in every generation that aren't, but
Mhm.
younger people tend to care about it more than older generations, right? Older,
Mhm.
there are like I know plenty of people who aren't interested, and sustainability is really a bad word for them, and they don't want to talk about it. And I, was told once, I'm not kidding, I was told once as part of a interview I was doing, the person the anchor that was interviewing me, I was talking about our dependency on oil, and she said, "Well, my husband's in oil, so you can't talk about that." Right? Like it just depends. But newer like the people graduating from college, that's kind of what I view as the younger people, like the people that are really recent entering the workforce.
Mhm.
It is most like it is one of their priorities, not just like something important, but most of them listed it as like a top 3 priority.
Okay.
So I do think everybody cares, and I do think everybody needs to care.
Yeah, and I know
It just depends.
we had some interesting conversations earlier this week about recycling and trash generation
Yes.
at major events and major venues. So but it's got to be tipping, right? I mean, even that it's on the radar of people. Like I'm not just entering the workforce, right? And I go to some
Right.
sporting events or whatever, and you just see all this trash being generated, and it's
Yeah.
like it
That hurts
hurts a
my
little
heart
bit.
every time I go to something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that cup's going to be there for the next, I don't know how long it takes, but 100 years or whatever before it goes away. So it's yeah, I think, I don't know. I agree with the younger statement, right? I do think younger people are more dialed into it, but
Right.
I also
But I
agree
think
with Melody.
more
Like
of them
that,
care. Not that no one
yeah.
other cares. Like in percentage wise, more of the younger generations tend to
Mhm.
care than older generation. But there are wonderful people of every generation that care, right? Which is
Right.
great because I've been in this field for, you know, 10, 15 years, and I have definitely been very grateful for the many people who came before me and have taught me what I need to get to this point.
Sure.
When was the
I have a
point? Oh, sorry, Alex, go
Garrett, I have a
ahead. Nope.
question. Yeah, I have a question for you, Garrett. So we were talking earlier about project types, but what about as far as lead? Do you see more of it through new construction, renovations, historic preservation? What types of projects do you see the trend
I don't know that I
most
see
typically?
one or the other leading.
Okay,
I see them really, really common. I feel like right now, and I think this is partly in a response to COVID and the work from home shift, right? That I think there's not quite as much. I feel like new construction is slowed. Now, this is not official
sure,
research from my company, but what I'm seeing on the projects I'm working on are a little more focused on renovations, right? Like we've seen in the
sure,
news, how that there's empty space in a lot of downtowns and stuff like that. And so I think
Yeah.
people are taking advantage of that and then renovating that space. But I also am working on a good number of new construction projects, right? So it really just depends. And historic renovation ones are my favorite because, we say this all the time. Um, the greenest building is the one that's already built, right? If you can go in and
right,
make it and not just destroy all that embodied carbon and use it, then it's greener than it was not to, than just to throw it away.
sure,
And
sure.
SpecLink has some amazing historic renovation specs. I mean, that go hand in hand with these sustainability specs. I encourage everyone to look at the historic preservation specs that SpecLink has. Sorry, Alex, I forgot to tell you. Look at those. But they have some
Sure.
really, like look at the 0530 there. That's it's really interesting. So see, there's a whole uh, list in all of the divisions of these conservation specs. So I mean that goes hand in hand uh, with the sustainability. So I encourage everybody to look at those. I mean, there's one for roofing. There's one for period metals. So fixing rather than destroying and rebuilding, I think works so much better at this point,
Holly, let me,
sustainability wise.
excuse me. Excuse me. Garrett and Holly, I'm going to put a question out there, and whoever wants to jump on it first can go for it. Um, in the world of sustainability, are there red flag statements that you hear from people? if somebody says, hey, we really want to incorporate this into our design, um, are there some products or some features that you hear people asking for where you kind of get uncomfortable and you're like, oh, that's going to be really hard to work into this or to meet our goals? And I'll ask the flip side of that question also. Are there questions you hear that are like, oh man, this is great. I love working with this product because it's so it meets all of our goals every single time.
I hate it when people say you can get this many points for this, right?
Mhm.
Greenwashing. What I want to know is what are the attributes? What is the information? I don't when somebody tells me you can use our product and you'll get this many points. That doesn't that doesn't that's just marketing fluff,
Mhm.
And it's
okay?
usually wrong.
And it's usually wrong.
Is it really?
If they
Oh
have to
yeah.
focus on how many points you get rather than what are the VOCs, what are the what is the recyclability, like that, that's a big red flag for me.
Oh, I
Yeah,
want
and it's
Garrett. Can
not
you elaborate on that? Yeah, that sounds
and why
exciting.
it's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
usually, I mean, I've seen things. Did I lose you? What just happened?
Nope. You're
Oh, we
here.
got
Okay,
you.
good.
Yeah, pretty good.
Um, my headphones made a funny noise. Um, One of the things that I see frequently in products is that they'll say lead approved, like it'll say that like on the product, the product information, or it'll say it contributes to, and it'll list 12 different credits within the lead rating system, right? And it does contribute a little bit to some of them, but sometimes I'm like, I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, right? Like, you know, for instance, glazing, right? Like on every one of them is going to contribute to daylighting, right? But it's like, well, that's kind of a given, and it's not necessarily just choosing one manufacturer over another that's going to make the daylight better, right? It's the performance attributes of it and the design of the building. So that's what I meant by it's frequently feels like it's a little over marketed, and then people who don't have a big green nerdy education and focus read that and say, oh, this is what I need, right? This is supposed to help me in all these great ways. And so it actually feels misleading when I do that. And so that's one thing I have the ability to do is now understand what it's actually going to contribute to, where it's actually going to help, and be able to sort through what it feels like misinformation sometimes.
Sure.
Have
What
you?
about green roofing? Is that still um, common?
Meaning a green roof, specifically like a vegetated roof.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It depends on where you live. I think
That
in
makes
some of
sense.
the larger cities, that becomes more and more prevalent, right? As they're trying to reintroduce the green space into urban environments, which is a
Sure,
trend and a positive trend.
sure.
I feel like yeah, people either do it there or they do it in spaces where it's a big building and they have rooftop access or something like that, and so they'll add some of it there. Um, but green roofs are beautiful. I've never been on a green roof that I've actually thought was not just beautiful to be part of.
But on the
I
flip
have been
side,
on some that have died, but
somebody can use that term, well, we want a green roof, and they may not necessarily mean, the roof with all of the plants and etc. They may mean, oh, I want it to meet green criteria. And so
right.
sometimes people
Ah,
use that term green roof uh, interchangeably. That they mean, and we really need to drill down and see, like, okay, what are the attributes of the roof? How is it manufactured, of the products? How is it manufactured? What is the SRI? What are the requirements? So when you say I want a green roof, I always have to clarify, what do you mean when you use the term green roof? Because people are using that in different ways. They're not necessarily using the ones with the plants and things on it.
Right. And I've been on many green roofs of different kinds, like some that are fully walkable, some where you walk up and you can literally just like stand in this 5 foot by 5 foot area and just look around, you know. And remember, green roofs have a purpose, right? They are like it is one about bringing green space into a building, right, or onto a building so people can enjoy it. But also, like, they're direct contributors positively to removing the heat island effect, right? That's one of the biggest things that they do. They're also significant insulators, which is another benefit.
Holly, do we have a good
I,
section
I
for
won't go on.
the vegetation roofs?
The vegetated roofs, I haven't looked at it.
Okay.
I'm sure you
I
do.
I think that we do. I don't know
I'm
what
sure you do.
section it's
You've
in.
got a vegetated roof.
Well, Alex is looking for that.
Looks
I'm
like it's
gonna.
right
Oh,
there.
there's one.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, I know which manufacturer I like the most. Oh, yeah.
All right.
But yeah. So there.
Very good.
All of the SpecLink sections are good. Now let's come on. But remember, you have to customize them to your needs. Don't expect
Yes.
to just open something up and use it right out of the box. Customize it and make it for your firm.
The same way you would for any of your drafting software or any other software
Right,
you're going to use.
right, right.
Do we have anything? Question: do we have anything for green walls or living walls or what? Anybody doing any green vertical surfaces?
A
They're
lot of firms
becoming more and
do.
more
A
common
lot of
too.
Yeah, a lot of firms do that, and they're so pretty.
Mm-hmm.
They are. They really are, being able to bring that into your space. Yeah, especially if it's real. That's my favorite. Like, I'm always a little bummed if I go see a green wall that is covered in fake
That
plants. I'm
plastic
like,
one.
oh, right. Like, it looks really, really nice, but feel like we missed an opportunity here, right?
Oh, I like those
Yeah,
ones with the
I
reindeer
love when
moss.
it's real.
Have you seen those ones with the
Ranger
reindeer
bug.
moss? I love those. They're real and they're. I mean, I love those.
Have you guys been a part of any projects that have had really creative material reuse in them?
Yeah.
Wheels are spinning.
Trying
The
to-
wheels are spinning. I'm always curious. I love to see how people repurpose things in new buildings because it's kind of tricky, right? If you're, using something maybe that was from a previous building or something salvaged that they want to incorporate into a new build. Do you see much of that? Is that a point that people are going after?
I love to see repurposed flooring. There's a beautiful building that in Houston in the MD Anderson complex, the old Nabisco building, where they repurposed the flooring. It's just beautiful. And I was actually in an office here in downtown Dallas recently, and we were looking at the floors, and the security comes up and is like, "What are you doing?" Because we were on the ground, like looking at the
So
floor. And
Got
suspicious.
my icon, my
Just
contact. Yeah.
yeah, so I love to see when there's like an old warehouse or that's been repurposed and they reuse the wood flooring because it's
Mhm.
so beautiful.
We've got a comment
People really
here
care about
from.
stories like that too, right? People
Yeah,
love to hear we
Yep.
reused this, right? We've
yeah.
repurposed this.
There's
There-
a restaurant in town here that repurposed old bowling lanes into their tables.
Oh,
So
how
all the wood from the
beautiful.
bowling, yeah, and it's kind of I don't know, does your food taste better somehow because you're in this good spirit of like being around these
right,
cool products? I don't know, but
right.
it's
It feels
definitely
fun.
cool.
It's like enlivening, right? That
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
given
yeah.
life to this old product that could have gone in the garbage, right?
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
I've like repurposed it, and it's beautiful, and it tells this unique story, right? Just by
Yeah,
sitting
Story.
there looking at the table, you can like
yeah,
see, oh, well, the ball must have hit here, right? Or
yeah,
I wonder
yeah,
what
yeah.
logo this represented right here, right? Since this piece
yeah.
clearly has some paint on it. Yeah, it's like
Absolutely.
it's fun to look at that.
Holly, that
I've
reminds me of
seen.
your beer can house.
Oh yeah, everybody. Um, since the CSI conference is going to be in Houston this year, I told Dory, make some time for me. We got to go visit the beer can house. It's like
And I said
a
I wanted to
house
make
made
my
out of
own beer
cans.
can house. I want to make my own beer can
Yeah,
house. No,
I
that's
don't drink things, but it's really interesting. There's an art car museum. I think it's closed now, but you can still drive by and see the outside of the art car museum too and see all of the fun. That's recycling, repurposing, like creating a car out of like old Barbie doll heads.
So
You'll see it
Marjorie,
driving around.
we got a couple of cool comments here about reuse. So Jordan said, I worked on a school recently where we had cut down a bunch of local trees and repurposed the lumber as siding and millwork throughout the new building on campus. That is such a cool story. I love that.
Nice.
Marjorie
That
also
is really
wrote,
cool.
we did the reclaimed tree wood gym floor in one of my school projects. Maple
Oh, beautiful.
syruping tap holes and everything. Like
Oh,
that
how
is
beautiful. I would love to see
that's
pictures of that.
Marjorie, can you send us some photos?
Yeah, send us some pictures, and we'll put you as the winner. We'll vote for you.
That's right.
Yeah, send her one of those speaker things.
We will.
That
And if
should be
anybody,
that's awesome.
yeah. So we've got 4 minutes left here, guys. So that kind of scooched by quick. Garrett, I'm going to ask you for one sort of concluding question. Is what is the future of sustainability looking like? Like if we did this same webinar in 50 years, in 100 years from now, like what's the conversation going to sound like? Or 25 years, maybe not so distant, but
Not
where
so
are we
distant.
going?
I think it will be so common to be part of the conversation. Right? We've got chief sustainability officers are becoming more and more frequent, right? Which is great, right? To have like, a decision maker at the top who can actually have a budget and ability to impact that. And I think a lot of it you won't even know is there, right? We're seeing, which is I mean, run tree hugger, right? So we're seeing, lawsuits that are happening with to stop greenwashing, right? With people saying you can't just make claims, you've got to actually have data to back up your claims. You can't just say my product is green because I washed it off with water and now it's clean, right? And and that makes it green, right? You have to actually have verifiable data to be able to put back the truth behind it, which is really good, and that I feel like is becoming more and more common as that conversation becomes more sophisticated, which is really beneficial. So I think I see that just becoming more and more common, and decarbonization um, has just taken off the last few years, right? As people have really focused on renewable energy, um, which is a successful strategy, right? Like people can design carbon neutral buildings, right? That's happening, um, and I think that we're going to go from there to working then immediately on um, beyond just carbon neutral buildings, but now how can we do carbon embodied carbon and remove those conversations, or remove that carbon directly from the product before we ever get there, to optimize really that product in the best way that we can, right? Trying to mitigate climate change, which is really where all that boils down to, right? But resilience is a conversation that's going to have to continue to have, right? How we can then be able to design buildings to withstand the future climate events that we're going to have, right? As we've just seen with Helene and things. How can we design buildings to be able to withstand stuff like that are becoming more frequent and more intense?
Right.
So,
Okay, so all of this is being recorded, Garrett. So we're going to have to do this again in 50 years. We'll replay this conversation. We'll just
see if I was right.
we'll fact check you just to make sure that everything. No, and I agree. It'll be interesting where it all goes, but it does feel like it's headed in the right direction.
It does,
I want to thank
which is
Garrett
really
and
happy to
Holly.
hear.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for the family tree.
Family tree.
Garrett and Holly, thank you again so much for being here and sharing your knowledge and expertise with everyone. Alex, you're a rock star. It's always a pleasure doing these with you as well. If you would like to get in touch with Holly and or Garrett, their email addresses are on the screen there for you to reach out. And just if you're going to reach out early, right? We got to get them on day one of your project if you need their assistance with anything. And join us next session. So just a special note on this one. It's not 2 Wednesdays from now. It's the Tuesday before that. So October 15th. It's going to be on a Tuesday. Our special guest will be Amy Baker from Amy Baker Architect. And we're going to be talking about small projects and the differences between small and large and how specifications are approached for various scaled projects. And also, if anybody out there happens to be going to CSI in Houston this year, I will be there as well. So hopefully we can connect and meet in person and say hello and go from there. So once again, thank you everybody for attending. This was fantastic. Thank you to the whole panel for putting trees in their background to just reinforce the sustainability content for today. And yeah, we're all really excited to do this again. So thank you again to everybody for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.